Okay. I'm sure many of you have been to expos before, but I think there's a lot of new folk here, and that's really essential for our successes and to keep driving us forward. We need you people. We need you to come on board to support the efforts. You've listened to a lot of great presentations today about some superb projects around the world. And I guess because we're in Zimbabwe, we're last, because it's Z. They probably went in alphabetical order. So I really appreciate you, the hardcore, that kind of stuck it out for the whole day. So painted dogs, as we like to call them, African wild dog, Cape hunting dog, they've got so many names. Painted wolves is coming up as a possible new one. So just to the situation regarding the dogs, there's fewer than 7,000 left in the whole of Africa. So you've heard numbers. Hefe just talked about lions, and indeed, it's true, there's about 20,000 lions left in the whole of Africa, which is shocking to think that. I think of all of us today, Claudio has got the record for the lowest number of individual animals that he's working with. So we're all in that situation, but in terms of the dogs, there is a real possibility that they can become extinct in our lifetime. And so it is essential that we take action. And what we at PDC, what we firmly believe in is the individual. The individual is critical, whether that's an individual dog, whether that's a person, it matters. And it really, really makes a difference. And what we believe is that you have to change lives. If you're going to make a difference, you're going to make a lasting difference in conservation, you have to change lives. Whether it's people, whether it's the life of an individual dog. And I'm going to highlight some of that with you today, what we do at PDC to change lives and thus make a difference to the long-term success and future for this fantastic species. And they're very, very easy to fall in love with, let me tell you, once you work with them on a daily basis, as we do. And some of you you've traveled out to Zimbabwe, seen the dogs, other places, Botswana, I think, people have been to and seen the dogs. So once you see them, you'll be captivated by them. There's a lot of myths that in the early days, and still to this day, we have to work very hard at dispelling those myths. One of them is that dogs go around, they eat everything in their path. And that's just simply not true. Here's a situation this is in Mana Pools in the north of Zimbabwe. The water buck, if I don't know how good your natural history is, the water buck here, that's not really on the menu for dogs. Occasionally they might take a calf. But impala over here, absolutely, is on the menu for dogs. But you can see there's this relationship that the predator-prey have with each other. And they know what's going on. They know the dogs have not hunted. They've finished hunting for the day in this particular instant. The dogs, obviously, they're a pack animal, and the pups are everything. The whole purpose of their existence is to raise pups. And it's a shared responsibility within the pack. It's not just the alpha female who has the pups, or the alpha male who's the dad. The whole pack care for the pups, protect the pups, feed the pups. It's a very evolved social system, which indicates a high level of intelligence, although, to be honest, sometimes you question that, because it's like they're determined to become extinct when some of the things that we deal with. They're not hyenas. They're not related to hyenas. And just in case there's any confusion, that's the hyena on the right. You'll be surprised, you laugh, the number of zoos that you go to, and that we go to, and you talk to the keepers, and the number of people that come up to, and there's the dogs in the enclosure, the exhibit, whatever it is, and it's, oh, look at the hyena. And the keepers are like, no, it's not a hyena. So there's still a lot of work to be done there. And it's still, it surprises me. It's a numbers game for the dogs. An individual dog, you can see from the picture, an individual dog is smaller, much smaller than a hyena, but they work together. It's that teamwork, it's that spirit that they have that makes the difference. The next slide's a video, guys, and can you play it from there? Okay, so this just play it. This illustrates. Oh, you want me to shut up? Yeah, okay. So that's a good dog-hyena interaction. But you see, it's all about numbers, and that's just the hyenas are coming around. Maybe there were pups there with the adult, with the dogs, or the hyenas were just checking out if there was something to eat. And like I said, it's a numbers game for the dogs. They're not related to domestic dogs. They're not even closely related to domestic dogs, although a lot of their behavior when you observe them in the wild reminds you so much of our domestic dogs at home. And to try and put that into some kind of context, the relationship between painted dogs and domestic dogs is similar to the relationship between us humans and baboons. And now we may know people like Hefe, who you would call a bit of a baboon, but it's not the same thing. And especially when he's had a few glasses of wine, he's even more of a baboon, but it's not the same thing. So they're not related, they cannot breed. It's a big problem that Claudio has with the Ethiopian wolves, breeding, hybrids, breeding with domestic dogs. Luckily, that's not a problem that we have. So we're talking about changing lives. And I grew up in England. I was around 8 years old, watched a documentary on TV called Solo. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. If you haven't, try and download it off, I don't know, Amazon or Google, or if you speak to Dave, he can probably download a pirate copy for you. It's a very good book as well. And it was filmed in the Serengeti, in Tanzania, by Jane Goodall and her husband at the time, Hugo van Loick. And it documents the sort of life of this one little pup that kind of got left behind by the pack and so on and so forth. I was captivated by that. And that's one of my early childhood memories in terms of an interest and a passion for wildlife. I was around 8 years old. That's my son with me there. He's 10, so I was a little bit younger than him. Fast forwarding a few years, I was living still in the UK, and I was decorating my apartment. I was living with my long-term girlfriend at the time. We'd been together for I don't know how many years. Try not to count those things. And so I was on one of those little steps with that tray and the roller, those kind of rollers, and you're kind of painting the wall. And I was like, oh, God, really? Maybe it was the color of the paint, I don't know. But I put the tray down and everything. I'm like, we have to talk. And that really didn't go down very well, to be honest. But a few years after that, a couple of years later, I was in Zimbabwe, and painted dog conservation became a reality. This is where we operate. This is Zimbabwe, a bit of geography for you. Most of our work is conducted here in the west of Zimbabwe, which is Wangi National Park. We do work up in the north as well, in Mana Pools. And you can see Zimbabwe for the dogs is very strategic. We have around 700 to 800 dogs in Zimbabwe only. And again, I can put some context into that. Here in Wangi National Park, there are 40,000 elephants, about 150, 160 dogs. So, big challenges. We have 3 key populations. This whole Wangi, this sort of western side of Zimbabwe is one population. The north, up there, the lower Zambezi. And then down here, Gonorrhoea Save, which is where Pete did his PhD on the dogs down in that area. And these populations, they link, this Gonorrhoea population links with Kruger into South Africa. Obviously, this Wangi population links across, going west to Botswana. The populations in the north link to Zambia, they link into Mozambique. So Zimbabwe is really, strategically, is a really important country for the dogs. When I first went there, one of the first dogs I saw was Eye-Spot. And this is Eye-Spot. We followed him day in, day out. Those of you who've been to Zimbabwe, spent time with us, read my newsletters, whatever, you've heard about Jealous. He's my main tracker, fantastic guy. Would have been with me here today, but he cut his foot when he was ploughing his field. So he had a bad infection in his foot and he couldn't make the trip, but he's okay now. So we would go out every day tracking Eye-Spot and his pack. Eye-Spot was with his brother. His brother was the alpha male, met a nice girl called Crescent, and they had some pups. They were out hunting one day and Eye-Spot was killed in a snare. His brother Arrow was killed in a snare. Crescent had the pups, she's back at the den, so Eye-Spot's on his own, he's hunting, trying to feed Crescent and the pups. Crescent left the den to help him, she got caught in a snare. Luckily she didn't die, she was on her leg and we were able to deal with her, get data and take the snare off a few weeks later. But he raised all of his brother's pups, which statistically is also unusual. And next year, he'd assumed the alpha position. He had pups of his own and raised all of them. So now this is really going strong. You've got a pack of 10, 12 dogs. It's really picking up. And they were shot by a farmer. And I tell you, I cried absolutely buckets. And I still cry to this day. That was 17 years ago. And when an individual dog is killed, particularly if it's a snare, if it's by man, run over, killed in a snare, we don't get many shot these days. We don't hear about them being shot anyway. I'm not saying they don't, but we don't hear about it. I still cry to this day, because that's how much it affects you. When you're working out there on the front line of conservation, you're really close to these animals. It's a very personal relationship that you have with them. And Eye-Spot's life story is this is our visitor center in Wangi, and his life story is depicted in our visitor center. Changing lives. This is Vusili. Vusili translates as smart, as in like street smart in the local Ndebele language. She turned up at our rehab facility as an orphan. We knew her. Jealous knew her, knew the pack, not very well. They were sort of kind of on the periphery of our core area of operation. She'd never been to our rehab before, and she turned up on her own. And we kind of guessed that there was a problem, and we never saw the rest of that pack again. And she was on her own. She came starving, and she came in to the rehab facility herself. We fed her up. We had some other dogs there that we'd been rehabbing, injured, the kind of really eclectic bunch of dogs that we had there at the time. And she actually, it was very perfect timing. She kind of finished off the pack, what we needed, and then we released them. After a while, we lost track of them all. Some got snared, and there was, the pack itself didn't fare too well. But she did. And she met another dog, and they had 6 pups. And they raised all of them to adulthood. This is one of them, Socks. Socks is now the alpha female of one of our most productive packs in Wangi. Socks herself has had 40 pups. That single intervention of saving Vasili's life has contributed more than 70 dogs into the Wangi ecosystem. 70 out of 150 that currently exist. One dog, you can trace it all back to that one intervention to save the life of one dog. And that's how important it is. Science we deal with, we've got a great collaboration going on at the moment with Stanford University, where we've sequenced and assembled the whole genome of the dog. You can see my number one assistant is there as ever, checking what we're doing. And the implications for that are tremendous. I'm not a scientist. There's lots of doctors this, doctors that here, and that's fantastic. I'm not a scientist, I'm a manager. I just get things done. Not that they don't get things done, but that's my speciality, is getting things done. The implications of this DNA work are huge for the dogs, where we can look at the relatedness within a pack, we can look at relatedness within populations, across boundaries, and it can lead to informed management decisions. We fit collars, protective collars. Some controversy around collaring animals and that kind of thing, and it's kind of a tool. Typically, it's a tool to help you understand your species. In our case, it saves lives. This is Socks. A few weeks ago, we fitted a collar. Her pack, the Nyamandlovu pack, as we call them, used to spend pretty much all, 100%, certainly 90% of their time inside Wangi National Park, which is relatively safe in terms of snaring, setting snares and poaching. But they shifted their territory out of the park. And so we were very, very busy early in the year, collaring the alpha male, deploying our anti-poaching units into the area. We were working with our colleagues in Botswana who have this bio-boundary methodology where they use feces and urine from other dogs to create the impression that there are dogs in this area. So there's a pack of dogs where you folk are, and we don't want them to come on the stage. And you put the urine and feces here to create an impression that this is occupied territory. And it works to a degree, but you can imagine, there's kids in the room, so I won't kind of use the normal expressions I might use, but you can imagine you need an awful lot of poo to create the impression of a pack of dogs in an area. They went missing for about a week, the pack, not long after we'd collared her, and that's not unusual for dogs. They cover huge territories. 750 square kilometers is an accepted average for size of territory for one pack of dogs. And then they turned up again, and one of the safari operators, I was actually on the trail, I was literally following the footprints, and then I just picked up the signal of her collar. And I drove around the corner and they just disappeared off the road, which is also typical of them. You've been looking for them for like a week, and the 5 hours that morning from 4 a.m. it's like 9 a.m. and you just see a tail disappear into the bush. And oh, thanks very much for that. So, but the operator had seen them and he said, one of the collared dogs has got a wound on its neck. So I waited the whole day and they came out onto the road in the evening, which is typical, and it was Socks. The wound was not serious, I wasn't worried about it, but I could see the damage on the collar, and there was no question that she'd been in a snare. The collar had saved her life. And as a consequence of that, we've got sponsors here, friends, and they've actually pledged $10,000 to buy protective collars, but I have to match it. So between all of you in here, we need $10,000 by 5:30, okay? And not goats. We don't want goats. Here we really need money. Hard cash. You deal with these situations. When you're faced with a situation like this, it's a real emotional ride that you're on. Whether to act. Do you act, or do you leave this situation to unfold on its own? I act. And it's really, you find yourself, and you don't act out of any kind of sense of self-glory or gratification. It's really, you're drawn up into, really is an act of nature. It's a matter of life and death. Because as soon as you decide to act, the life of that animal is now in your hands. And at the time, there's nothing else matters. There's nothing else exists other than the life of that dog. And it really draws a lot out of you. But you are left with a deep sense of just who you are. And you're really motivated by this desire to leave something behind, to make a difference. And I generally don't do much else after because you're drained. You're physically, emotionally, you're drained. And, I'm a bit of a basket case for the rest of the day, to be honest. Some would say that's my normal state. But often, all you have to do is remove the snare. And that's enough. The dogs are tough, and they heal. The pack takes care of them. The pack will help. Like a wound like that one, that the dog, obviously, it can't get to itself, but the other pack members will keep that wound clean and free of flies and everything, and they heal. They are tough animals. We may bring them in to our rehab facility where they can recuperate. Serious cases we'll take to vets in Bulawayo. This is like 300 kilometers away. And the vet will work on the dog for us. Again, and they'll rehab in our facilities there in Wangi before we release them back into the wild. Sometimes they're beyond help. This dog, his back he was alive. In this picture he's alive, but his back's broken. And we had to euthanize him. So we put an awful lot of resources into anti-poaching, recovering snares. We've recovered more than 30,000 snares. We estimate 10% of snares set kill. So that's 3,000 plus animals' lives that have been saved right there and then. And these snares, they're not set for the dogs. These are set for meat. They're set for small to medium-sized antelope in our systems. That could be a duiker, a steenbok, a kudu, impala. But poachers, they'll set snares for a giraffe. They'll set snares for elephant, for buffalo. They'll go into an area, they see what spoor is there, the footprints. They can tell what animals are moving through these areas, and they'll set snares accordingly. But obviously the ones that really impact the dogs are the ones that are set for the same species that the dogs themselves are hunting. And the dogs being so mobile, they can be here today, they can be 5-10 kilometers away tomorrow. That's normal for the dogs. So the chances of them encountering a snare are really high. So we put a lot of resources into anti-poaching, and with Peter, there's a great initiative gathering some traction in Wangi, where a lot of the stakeholders have come together and they're raising money from their clients. These are safari operators, and they're raising money from their clients and they're putting it into a conservation fund to support anti-poaching. Fantastic. Peter asked me to host, he was still at Panthera, he asked me to host a workshop at PDC. And because it was my bush camp and nobody could kick me out, I was fairly blunt with a number of the operators. I was like, you have contributed to the loss of more than 50% of the wildlife in this area, because you pump water in front of your lodge to attract animals down so that your wealthy clients can sit there with their gin and tonic and enjoy looking at the wildlife by the waterhole, and you do nothing to protect them. You do nothing to protect those animals. Where do you think the poacher sets his snare? On that game trail leading down to your waterhole. I had to shut up and sit down in the end because it was getting too much. But they got the message. To be fair, they were already in that process. They'd already recognized that. For 15 years, we've been doing anti-poaching on our own, on their properties, protecting the animals that they're making money from. But now they've recognized it and they've come to the table, and it's fantastic. It's a great initiative, and it's going to make a huge difference. These are my guys, tough guys. Anybody wants to come out to Zimbabwe, go on a patrol with my anti-poaching unit, you're welcome. I bet you only do it for one day because it's really tough. But it makes a difference. We have posters all over the place trying to encourage people to report crime, report wildlife crime, trying to stop it at its source. We're going to engage tracker dogs. And again, this has come out of partnerships with and through WCN. One of our great supporters, Houston Zoo, sent the head of my anti-poaching unit to Zambia, to a project, again, that Peter and Hefe know well, where they do a lot of anti-poaching, and they use dogs. So before we invested in these kind of dogs, I wanted to know how it works, and what are the pros and cons, and how can it help us in our particular situation. And he was sponsored to go there, came back, reported, we're going to get dogs, and hopefully they're going to help us combat the poaching even further. I want my guys to patrol with the dogs, and when they find snares, pick up the scent of who set the snare and follow that scent back to the village. I want to be there when they knock on that guy's door and they find the snares. But it's not just dogs. It's not just the animals, it's the people that you have to work with, the people that live on the edge of these wildlife areas. This is a statement by Nelson Mandela that we take to our heart, to the core of what we do. And we interact. We have more than 800 children a year from the local schools, primary schools that border Wangi National Park, 21 schools. These are 11-year-old kids that come in, and they come in for 4 days, a 4-day residential program. These kids, they live right on the edge of Wangi National Park, but if they've had any interaction with wildlife at all, it was probably negative. Lions, obviously lions, killing their livestock. Elephants, crop raiding. Baboons, crop raiding. A negative experience if they've had any at all. And you cannot expect people to even care, let alone take action to conserve something that they have no appreciation of, no understanding of, they don't love. We only protect and care for something that we love. And that's what we aim to do with these kids. We introduce new concepts to them to inspire them, motivate them, give them a purpose, a direction in life. So that they have this passion, they have this connection with the wildlife. Obviously the dogs, particularly in our case, is the flagship species, but it's not all about the dogs. It's about the ecosystem, it's about all of the wildlife. The dogs are just part of that process. And they leave highly motivated. This young girl, Tendai, she left our bush camp 11 years old. She was at home, she went for a walk in the forests near her home with a friend of hers who had also been to the bush camp. And they found a kudu alive in a snare. And they rushed home, actually it was her uncle, got him to come. And normally they would kill the kudu, not the kids, but they would go and get the uncle and he'd kill the kudu and thank you very much, we've got meat for the next few weeks. But they because she was so passionate and cared so much, she persuaded her uncle to let the kudu go. They released the kudu alive. And these are really poor villages. They live, barely, you can't even say they live just above the poverty line. There's no line. And they went further. They checked around. They found more snares. They found footprints and spoor. They recognized the footprints, the particular tread pattern of the shoe, and had the poacher arrested. And that's out of the bush camp. That's, you can inspire and motivate people. And that's what you need. It's okay to change, you can change attitude. And I won't say it's easy to change attitude, but you can change people's attitude, outlook, their perspective. But you have to change behavior. You have to get that behavioral change if you're going to make a difference. And that's what we do. So the conservation, conserving wildlife, protecting the environment becomes part of their everyday life. And that's now where you're starting to change. You're starting to create an environment where not only the painted dogs, but all wildlife can thrive. And that's what we're after. But you have to get that behavioral change in there. So as I said, conservation, the environment, the wildlife, protecting it becomes part of their everyday life. They live and breathe it as much as we do. We have other programs as well. Again, changing lives. Water, we all take it for granted. There's not a single person in here that can't go home and turn a tap on and get water. But in these African villages, that's not possible. They often, having a borehole like this, where you pump by hand water from, could be 100 feet down. And again, come and do it and see how hard it is. But it's life-changing for these kids, these people that live in these villages. If they only have to walk a mile to get fresh water, because we've put a borehole in a strategic place. Because before that, they had to walk 5 miles. And that's 5 miles there and 5 miles back with a 20-litre bucket of water on your head. Try doing it. It's tough. Alongside these boreholes, we have garden projects. And again, a big problem in Africa, certainly in our location, is like these food aid, these handouts from different governmental whatever organizations, handing out food to people. It encourages people to do nothing. It doesn't reward the people who are trying to do something. It rewards the people who are doing nothing. It becomes politicized. Which party do you vote for? Oh, what do you have here? Democrats and Republicans, isn't it? Whatever. You can be one and get a handout. If you support the other one, you get nothing. It becomes politicized. It's one of the biggest problems we face in our area, and I'm sure it's not unique to us. I'm sure Laurie can talk about the same things and the other projects in other parts of Africa, and I'm sure beyond Africa. It's a big problem. We don't do that. We develop these gardens as just this one example of what we do. So people can help themselves, and it makes a huge difference. What we've seen through this, you get better attendance at school, you get better performance at school, we get better retention of teachers at the school, because it's a better place to be, because they've got their garden and they can grow crops, if they grow surplus crops, they can sell them to buy other things, and so on and so forth. Life changes, life improves. Wendy, are you in here? This fantastic little lady, I'll ask her to stand up, but it won't make much difference because she's so small. So, yeah, that's good. Wave your arms. She was a trapeze artist, strangely, and a legal secretary. I don't know how the hell the two went together. Then she came out to Zimbabwe and founded our Iganyana Arts and Crafts program. And this is, again, it's a life-changing program. We have more than 20 artisans working there every day, turning those deadly wire snares into fantastic works of art, providing income for these 20 or more people working there. Wendy's expanded it out into the villages with women making baskets and things like that. Each person that works there probably supports 8, 9, 10 other people. So that, those 20 people working there support 200 people, and so on and so forth. It's life-changing work. We run vaccination programs, not of the painted dogs, domestic dogs. We don't want rabies and distemper coming from the domestic dog populations into the wild. The people don't want rabid dogs running around the villages. So again, it's a quid pro quo. We all benefit from it. We spay and neuter as many of those dogs as we can as well. We sponsor the local soccer league, not because I like soccer, but because this youth, there's very high unemployment and very few opportunities for employment. We're the biggest employer in the area, 55 people, all from these villages. It's a policy, a deliberate policy that we have. We employ from those villages. We don't, if we advertise a position, if there's somebody from Harare, Bulawayo applies and better qualified for the position, I'll always give it to the local person first and train them. I don't care about qualifications. I've got no qualifications. I know nothing about nothing. But I can be trained. And it's the same way at the soccer league. We sponsor the soccer league, so it gives us a lever to work with the youth that are engaged in playing football. And of course, they love it. Africans love football. We have a HIV program that reaches 20,000 people a year. Yeah? Prior to this program, people had to travel 200 kilometers to get an aspirin. If the clinic had an aspirin, you'd travel 200 kilometers and find they got no aspirin. Come back tomorrow. Yeah? We've brought quality, life-changing health care to 20,000 people in our immediate surrounds. Why? I'm not a doctor. It's not my job to really care. I care about dogs, to be honest. These guys are kind of quite brutal with me, with some of their comments, and they were sort of saying, we're involved with wildlife because we can't get on with people, Maybe, I don't know. But at the end of the day, everything we do is for the dogs. The soccer league, the HIV program, the boreholes. At the end of the day, it's all about the dogs and changing lives one day at a time, one dog at a time, one day at a time, one person's life at a time, one day at a time. so that they will help us. In the case of the people, they will help us, and you get that behavioral change that you need to make a difference. And we've seen plenty of examples of it. We got 40 people volunteered to do anti-poaching in the villages around, in the forests around their village, because a dog was killed in a snare. And Jealous and my education guys took the dog, and as Peter will vouch, they don't smell that great when they're alive, to be honest, and when they're dead, they're really unpleasant. And they took the dead dog and they laid it down in front of the chief, who was having a meeting with his headmen, village heads, and everything like that. And there was a picture of him before, Dominic, who was one of my education officers, very passionate guy. And he talked with great passion and emotion about the dog. This dog built that classroom, drilled that borehole, developed that garden, paid for those school fees. What have you done for this dog? You've killed it. That's what you've done. You've killed the dog that built and developed these villages around here. So I heard about all this, and I was waiting for a phone call that didn't come. And I was like, okay, that's a very interesting situation. I don't know how we're going to deal with this. And I got back to my office, and then the chief came to visit me. And it was his phone call I was waiting for. And he, with tears in his eyes, talked passionately again about what we have done, what the dog has done to change the lives of the people in his chiefdom. And he told me the action they were going to take. Poachers were arrested, kind of excommunicated from the villages, and this volunteer anti-poaching unit that was established. Behavioral change. You need that behavioral change to make a difference, and we're getting there. We're employing. These lads went to our bush camp when they were 11 years old. We're employing them now. Because tremendous support that we got from you good folk, allowed us to expand our anti-poaching unit towards the end of last year. And we recruited, from those volunteers, we recruited 5 of them, including 2 women, into our anti-poaching unit. So we're rewarding them. They're helping us, we're helping them, and it keeps going in that way. And you get that change that you need. And as I said, lives change. If you get involved, you become part of our team. You're already part of our team by the fact that you're here today. Maybe not Pee-wee, but most of you. This guy is an advertising executive from London. He was on holiday in Marner Pools with his mate. I was dealing with this dog. I was actually removing a collar that was no longer working. And I needed help, and I kind of roped them in. Do you think this guy's life has changed? We've got former bankers that are now chairman of PDC UK. We had a lawyer who came and spent 3 weeks with us, and she changed her career to become a politician. So I'm not sure which is. Have you got any lawyers in here? I'm not sure. Not sure which, but at least it was for the Green Party. So she was kind of heading in the right direction. If you help us, you get involved, work with us, become part of the solution, your life will change, hopefully for the better. And at the end of the day, we will leave something behind for our kids, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. And if we do that, we can look in the mirror and say, we've made a difference. Thank you. I've finished.